Here we will focus on Incoterms 2010 and study the most popular terms, FOB, CFR, and CIF in detail. FOB, free on board, means that the seller delivers the goods on board the vessel nominated by the buyer at the named port of shipment, or procures the goods already so delivered. The risk of loss of or damage to the goods passes when the goods are on board the vessel, and the buyer bears all costs from that moment onwards. Seller's major obligations under an FOB. Under an FOB, the seller must 1. Deliver the goods on the agreed date or within the agreed period, either by placing them on board the vessel nominated by the buyer at the named port of shipment, or by procuring the goods so delivered. 2. Bear all risks of loss or damage to the goods, as well as all costs relating to the goods before the delivery of goods. 3. Obtain any export license or other official authorization at his own risk and expense, and carry out all customs formalities necessary for the export of the goods. This obligation can be briefly referred to as export clearance. 4. Give the buyer sufficient notice about the delivery of the goods and the conditions of the carrying vessel. 5. Provide the buyer at the seller's expense with the euro proof of delivery. Buyer's major obligations under an FOB. Under an FOB, the buyer must 1. Contract at his own expense for the carriage of the goods and pay the freight. 2. Take delivery of the goods when they are shipped on board the vessel at the port of shipment. 3. Bear all risks of loss or damage to the goods, as well as all costs relating to the goods after the delivery of goods. 4. Take charge of the import clearance at his own risk and expense. 5. Give the seller sufficient notice of the vessel name, loading point, and the selected delivery time within the agreed period. Here are some points for special attention under an FOB. 1. According to Incoterms 2010, FOB is applicable only to ocean inland waterway transport. Previously, traders under FOB terms, when the goods were transported by rail, road, or air, such practices are inappropriate. 2. According to Incoterms 2010, the seller does not fulfill its obligation of delivery until the goods are shipped on board the vessel. This is a big difference from Incoterms 2000, where the place of delivery is the ship's rail. The new rules requires that the seller bear all the risks and costs to bring the goods on board. Such costs include loading expenses. 3. Under an FOB, the seller is responsible for getting the cargo ready for shipment at the agreed time and place, but the ship is to be nominated by the buyer. Therefore, it is very important to connect both the cargo and the vessel. Otherwise, there will be some serious problems. For example, if the seller gets the cargo ready at the port of shipment on time, but the buyer fails to send the boat to pick up the cargo, the seller have to pay extra warehouse charges and bear extra risk. On the contrary, if the buyer sends the ship on time, but the goods are not yet ready for shipment, the buyer has to bear that freight, which is the amount payable for the space booked on the ship but not fully occupied by the charter. Number 4. In business practice, FOB is usually applied to bulk cargo transactions, where chartering of a vessel or vessels is unavoidable. Meanwhile, traders also use FOB in small transactions. In that case, it is impractical for the buyer to nominate a vessel to pick up the goods. So, the buyer usually asks the seller to book the shipping space on the buyer's behalf, with all the risks and costs on the buyer's account. Of course, the seller may either accept or decline such a request and should notify the buyer of its decision promptly. Number 5. There are different interpretations of the term FOB by different trade usages. Here, we need to understand how American traders interpret FOB, since they usually apply revised American Foreign Trade Definitions 1941.